Welcome to How to Rock Spirit's Cosmic Consciousness audio series, a collection of spiritual, scientific, and psychedelic musings by Pluto's Corona, a Leo rising Scorpio with Sagittarius moon, born in the year of the metal ram. Pretty much all of these audio entertainments have been a collaborative effort between myself and my friend and producer Al Ginsberg. It is our belief that the truth and everything that can be known is already out there, and we're not here to explain it, we're here to explore it together. For more far-out discussions about spirit, alchemy, psychedelics, yoga, and cosmic intelligence, visit my YouTube channel, How to Rock Spirit, where you'll find a slowly growing database of all of Ram and Dog's psychedelic blogs and audio recordings. Take your time and enjoy the ride, folks, and we'll meet you on the other side. Namaste. And we're live. Okay. The title of tonight's discussion is called Esoteric Tantra, the Transmutation of Desire. I'm Dustin Cormier, and I'm here with my best dog, Al Ginsberg.
How's it going?
And his girlfriend, Rebecca, who's decided to join us. I guess I'm just going to go into it. I've got this little script here, and that's kind of what I'm going by. Now, as I said in my intro lecture, I have to say before I start that I want everyone to know that I'm actually a cosmic schmuck. I may act like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't know anything. It's the cosmic schmuck thing. I may seek to make my arguments as convincing as possible, as any preacher might, but never forget that I'm actually a cosmic schmuck in disguise. I'm not here to explain, I'm here to explore with y'all. Okay, now that that's out of the way. Georg Feuerstein wrote an amazing text which has really changed my life as a self-described yogi for the better in many deeply appreciable ways. This text of his is called Tantra, the Path of Ecstasy, and I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to really cut to the bone of what traditional Tantra as a cosmic ontology in a spiritual way is really all about. I'll be explaining the many ways in which true Hindu Tantra has changed my life and my spiritual philosophy throughout the unfoldment of this whole lecture series, the Cosmic Consciousness series. I could go on and on really about how Hindu Tantra has changed me, but I want to stick to a few key points for the sake of this discussion. One certain way in which Tantra has changed my life is through a simple recalibration of my understanding of spirit and material, and how they relate to each other, more specifically on the material end of things. Materialism is quite a confusing word, but all we have to do is to clarify our terms and be more sharp with our language in order to, liberate ourselves from its constraints. Materialism, as most people think of it, means only caring about material without caring about philosophical values which relate to the heart, the spirit, and the higher intrinsic order of man. That's what people usually think of when they think of materialism. I consider materialism to mean an inclusion of material reality as an equally necessary concern to the basic philosophical conception of the universe, and to include its provenance as a necessary aspect of man's higher purpose, rather than, that's what I think of materialism, rather than as its usual usage, which negates spiritual values, and thus signifies a focus on worldly material outright. That's not really what I mean by materialism. Anyway, I know some self-described materialists with deep mystical bents and a quite creative attitude toward things, who are not solely interested in getting their rocks off in the material world by accumulating wealth and then buying worldly pleasure crafts until they grow old and die. That's what most people think of the materialist. The true materialist simply has respect for the material side of reality and is often refreshingly ecologically sound about things too. In relation to what Tantra has taught me in relation to this, I would like to say, as I've written elsewhere, that I would consider the ultimate cosmic ontology to be contained by what I have termed the philosophy of cosmic materialism, in a way. Cosmic materialism suggests that all phenomena, all energy, whether material or spiritual, is contained by the mystical term called matter. Energy is a singular essence or force, It is just where it is aimed and what it is attracted to, which defines the different types or phases of energy, the elements. Spirit energy is metaphysical, representing the subtlest energy coming from within, while material energy is the gross shell or husk, moved by spirit, and vice versa, existing as worldly phenomena in time, that's material. As Tantra suggests, both of these aspects of the singular reality in which we live, the gross and the subtle cosmos, are what make up consciousness, and consciousness is the fabric of everything. All rocks, all concepts, all emotions, all souls and sentient life are contained by this all-encompassing ontology of consciousness. And in my reckoning, cosmic matter and consciousness are pretty much synonymous. Stuff, you know. Now I want to tie this idea in with the Tantric conception that upon considering spirit or Shiva within, and Shiva's eternal spouse called energy, the body, also known as worldly matter, the illusion of Maya, it's karmic action, or in a sense, the goddess Shakti. These two are equally pertinent aspects of consciousness, Shiva and Shakti. That's to the cosmic yogi who seeks soul realization and the soul completion of yoga. Now, I've always been a mystically oriented person, or what I might call a transcendentally oriented person. I've always thought that the body was something to transcend, and that karma was to be avoided completely. I know this may sound jarring to most spiritualists, as it did to me at first, but when you get into Tantra, you begin to realize that karma is actually the way out of karma, through dharma. Dharma is the proper use of karma. And as the embodiment of our spirit and soul essence, karma, meaning our total energy body, both metaphysically and physically, is the very tool which we use to attain the ecstatic completeness of Tantra yoga through the love of a partner and through sexual fusion of self and other, which of course is more than just sex. Sexual fusion is the absorption of separate cosmic elements into the oneness which they were born for and are aimed at. We can attain this sexual fusion through all of our worldly interactions, especially when we combine cosmic consciousness and astrology with the every moment presence of the breath. That's sort of almost like jnana and kriya. Kriya meaning action and jnana meaning knowledge, wisdom. Cosmic consciousness and astrology are like occult knowledge, and the breath brings the idea of the presence of like Zen meditation, of being here now. The breath is the sacred key to presence, to liberation, and to cosmic yoga through awareness and through the buddhi, the discerning faculty of the mind. Much of these understandings were unavailable to me before I got into Tantra yoga, because I thought that the embodied karmic soul was useless, was something to be thrown away in search of the transcendental principle. I used to deny my karma, to deny my nature and my desires, and to live only according to, the ascetic way of life, where one goes and meditates isolated from the world and its frantic concerns. I wanted to get away from my having a personality and having to need a personality, because I consider it to be karma, dimension, you know. And boy, was it lonely up there on that mountain. Now, I should certainly make the point here that that ascetic mendicant path can teach you a lot, and it was certainly necessary for me on the way to Tantra. That cold, distilled loneliness and sagacious monk-like crawl through old spiritual texts and esoteric wisdoms and books, which I ordered off Amazon, and all that sensual and sexual denial of the person who's, going for the renunciation path, the one who renounces the world. For a while, it was all very crucial to my deeper spiritual awakening, but I always had a tether back to the world. And I never really untied the rope and allowed myself to get fully lost in the mystic wilderness. I think I've got Leo ascendant and I've got Sagittarius moon, and they kind of make me a little bit more buoyant than my Scorpio sun wants. I don't know if it's my Scorpio sun thing. Plus, I've got the South lunar node in the 12th house, and that's Pisces. That's trying to get away from the world. I wanted to transcend the world. Kind of too early, I guess. You know what I mean? So I think getting lost in that mystic wilderness is a trip I'll have to take later on in my life, but not yet. Now everyone's karma is different, and from what I perceive in my astrological chart, I think my karma as a gregarious Leo rising personality with a fiery Sagittarius 5th house moon is leading me to a worldly life filled with artistry, social conscience, and a lot of things which I would have been denied in a typical monk monk-like setting, a wanderer setting. I think worldliness is a part of my self-realization this time around, and as it is apt to be for many people here in the age of Aquarius. I'm not making excuses here, mind you, for I'm still aimed at the ultimate goal of cosmic liberation. And I'll get into that in a moment. And I'm also certainly aimed at finding a guru down the road and doing the full-out tantric thing, rituals, mantras, spiritual disciplines, all that stuff. But my point is that there are many ways up the ecstatic mountain of bliss, but they all reach the same glorious peak of ecstatic oneness and soul completion. And different souls are to be completed in different ways at different stages of life, different cycles of the soul. But regardless of my personal way, it is important to note that the ascetic mindset, theologically speaking, the ascetic, the mendicant, the renunciant way of life, is a crucial aspect of spirituality, and indeed it's a crucial aspect of Tantra itself. But it's only half the axis. The other half is the opposite reality, the passionate, erotic, present moment embrace of material and sensual reality. Georg Feuerstein describes a vertical path and a horizontal path, and a third integral path which works to combine the two. I'll get into more detail about these in later discussions, but it's important to make the point now that the vertical method, it's synonymous with the ascetic mendicant renunciant model, which relates to the transcendental principle of Shiva and spiritual discipline, melting, This ascetic model, as I said, is only half the spiritual battle, and is indeed pretty well considered to be the best place to start on the journey to God in cosmic yoga. Living away from the world and its attachments is a great place to begin cultivating detachment, self-reliance, and communion with one's deepest soul purpose. But there's another important half called the horizontal or erotic path, the path of the worldly person, which is equally pertinent to true ultimate self-realization. This includes being in the world, engaging in the world, the release and completion of soul desires and passions on the earthly plane, and the embrace of the body and sensual reality. Both of these extremes of lifestyle, focusing within and, well, not focusing, but having consciousness within and having consciousness without, they're both equally pertinent toward reaching for the greater path, the third path, which is called the integral path. That's basically what I'm aimed at here. The integral path combines the dual vertical and horizontal lifestyles into a hidden tertiary dimensional axis, which can be seen to be neither vertical nor horizontal, but helical, being aimed within at some unplaceable point beyond the Cartesian plane of space-time. Think like helix, a spiral which spirals inwardly and outwardly, like the karmic axis of Saturn, which can expand out of karma or retract back into it. Buddhism has always advocated the middle way, and it is invariably important to this tantric ideology and philosophy as well. The ascetic path of the mendicant or the worldly renunciant on its own is just as debilitating ultimately to the cosmic yogi as is the erotic, sensual, desirous, worldly action method of the horizontal path is on its own, the hedonic lifestyle, kind of. Now, many people think that all they have to do to achieve spiritual bliss is to completely ignore the world and its duties and responsibilities. But the Tantrics, as is often said in Tantric scripture, according to G. Fauerstein, the Tantrics enjoy both yoga and boga. That is, they enjoy yoga, spiritual realization, as well as enjoyment in the world, sort of, material realization. It's called boga or bhukti in Sanskrit. Anyway, to quote from Fauerstein's Tantra, The Path of Ecstasy, the Tantrics directly experience the identity of nirvana, liberation, and samsara, the opposite of liberation. Having found their true center both within and without, they do not get lost in the sensory world, but know how to enjoy it as a manifestation of the divine. As the Kashmiri adept Utpaladeva sings in one of his hymns to Shiva, "Like worldly people, O Lord, may I thirst more for sense objects, but may I see them as your body without a notion of difference." Now this is now getting at the main theme of this discussion, which is the transmutation of desire. Desire can be translated as action in the karmic sense, among other things, obviously. Since actions are perpetuated when we act on them, so is desire enforced by our past and present actions. The ascetic path is often considered as the path of the one who renounces worldly action, but this is a kind of a fatal generalization, for worldly action is not only necessary, it is unavoidable. To this end, Georg Fauerstein notes on the subject of action versus renunciation in that same book, The Path of Ecstasy, and I quote, "As the Bhagavad Gita taught long ago, in chapter 3, verse 5, everyone is destined to be active, for life itself is action. The challenge is to be active in a way that our actions are not dictated by ignorance or delusion, but by liberating wisdom." This is like my personal notes on the text. This is why Tantrics and most religious traditions have their fancy little rituals. Rituals make our action sacred. Worship, puja, mantra, yantra, hatha yoga, pranayama, transcendental meditation. They're all ways of making our actions sacred and bringing us closer to bliss in our everyday life here on earth. Anyway, continuing the quote. "Far from being merely superstitious, ritual is a potent means of purifying the mind so that it can recognize its true nature, which is pure consciousness. Tantra does not regard action to be diametrically opposed to wisdom, as it is that's the doctrinal stance of Advaita Vedanta. The ultimate reality, which is pure consciousness, also is thought to be pure energy, that is Shakti. Thus, jnana and kriya, knowledge and action, are merely two aspects or sides of the same reality. This important notion is one of the great contributions of Tantra to philosophical discourses in India." That was from page 223 of Tantra, The Path of Ecstasy. Desire and action are not something to renounce or to do away with, for they are themselves the uncoiling serpent energy force, described anciently throughout the Indian and other traditions as the Kundalini energy force. Desire and action must be transmuted constructively, not used for backwards, self-indulgent purposes, which will only put us further into our karmic attachments. This is the reason why tantric techniques have historically been kept secret from the lives of regular worldly civilization or civilians. It's not an arrogance thing. It's more like refusing to give a dangerous object to a child, for the simple reason that the child, through its misunderstanding, could easily misuse that powerful object and ultimately harm themselves more in the long run, as a metaphor. This aspect of desire and action is a crucial part of Tantra. Tantra is usually seen to be much too liberal for most spiritual traditions. Tantrics are eaters of meat, drinkers of wine, and enjoyers of the senses. But this enjoyment is not used for selfish purposes. Ideally, it is contained within holy worship of deities, which are living in us and all around us, and allowing those deities to enjoy the fruits of the earth through our living human hands and tongues. By deities, I would suggest this to mean sort of like cosmic principles. In my terminology, I would say the Holy Father, or Shiva, as a deity, is it relates to the disciplinary factor or principle, which sharpens our minds and our senses, while the Mother, or Shakti, as a deity, the wife, it can be likened to the erotic principle, which opens up the passions of the human heart and allows the influx of joyous energy into a person, both of which are essential to health. For too much fatherly discipline is too tight, and yet too much motherly passion, enjoyment, is too loose. I'm going to quote something here, which of course I found in George Feuerstein's book, Tantra, The Path of Ecstasy. It is itself pulled from a tantric scripture called the Kula Arnava Tantra, chapter 2, verse 112 to 119, as somewhat paraphrased. Note that the goddess the speaker is referring to is in fact the divine self in its feminine aspect. That's sort of, the divine is the idea of like the higher order, and we all have the ability to align ourselves with that higher order. And this is that higher thing in its feminine form, the divine goddess. The idea of many of these old tantric texts is a beautifully rich dialogue between the sublime deities, Shiva and Shakti themselves, as otherworldly lovers, speaking to each other through the script of human writing, here derived from ancient Sanskrit. It's as if we can hear the infinite spirit consciousness, the one beyond, in which we all share kinship, called Shiva. It's the one talking with its manifested worldly aspect of energy in a beautiful transfusion of language. It's the universal one talking to itself as the many. This particular passage is the tantric devotee, meaning us, talking to the goddess Shakti, the divine feminine, also considered to be the very force of desire itself. And the divine feminine, it's sort of like a divine force that pulls us, attracts us toward our highest purpose, Quote, drinking wine, eating meat, and gazing at the face of one's beloved are not in themselves behaviors leading to the supreme state. This is the devotee talking to the divine Shakti. Only your devotees, O goddess, and none other, know this vision of Kula. Kula meaning the magnification of desire, which bestows enjoyment and liberation. Lacking instruction from a guru and being thoroughly confused themselves, such people who do not understand your true usage only confuse everyone else. Many who are duped by false knowledge imagine the tantric Kula teaching of magnifying one's desires. They imagine it according to their own mind. If men could attain perfection merely by drinking wine, all the wine-bibbing rogues would readily attain perfection. If the mere eating of meat would lead to a meritorious state, all the meat-eaters of the world would effortlessly enjoy merit. If mere intercourse with a woman would lead to liberation, all creatures in the world would be liberated by cohabiting with females. The text continues in this vein in chapter 5, verse 112. Shakti, divine aspect of erotic motion, is fast asleep in the beast, meaning in the person of worldly disposition, but it is wide awake in the Kaulika, the truly illumined tantric. He who serves that Shakti, meaning erotic desire used towards spiritual purpose, is known as a servant of Shakti. To quote Feuerstein directly in Paths to Ecstasy, He who is filled with the bliss of the union or intercourse between himself and the supreme Shakti, meaning erotic desire transmuted toward constructive purpose, engages maituna, or communion in the true spirit. Other desirous wanderers are mere womanizers. We can see here that it's not the desire itself that counts in Tantra. It's not the erotic motion that counts. It's what you do with it and how you transmute it for constructive spiritual purpose that counts. Although, in my opinion, sometimes eroticism is nice for its own sake, but that's all part of the fine line we're drawing as aspiring kalikas, or spiritually oriented tantric practitioners who are magnifying desire for higher purpose. Some people are more karmically disposed to an erotic nature than others, mind you. A distinction which I would leave up to astrology as well as to, your own feeling and intuition to decide. Shiva preaches in the Skanda Purana the seemingly ironic notion that one ought to practice austerities or disciplines, that's tamas, in order to magnify pleasure, that's kama. It's a phenomenon which I call the Shiva tease. It should be immediately clear here why this aspect of Tantra is a high-end game of spirituality, and why it has always been hushed up as a harshly kept secret in the societies in which it flourished. For the person invoking the ancient coiled serpent of Shakti energy and purposefully magnifying their desires can easily fall into the trap of attachment to sensation and wind up getting bitten by the snake, causing deeper karmic entrenchment in the long run. So listener beware, for some souls in this earth plane may not be ready for the self-transformative depths and the fiery dance of the real tantric tradition. How you guys doing? Good?
My back's starting to hurt. I think I need to lie down.
Okay.
Just do this, sorry.
You just pipe up whenever you feel you want to.
Yeah. I'm just kind of letting it naturally flow. I think it's because I'm stoned, but I don't have many ideas popping up. I'm just kind of listening.
No problem. It's just nice to have you guys here instead of me just talking to the walls.